Welcome to episode 49 of Redesigning Cities, the Speedwell Foundation Talks at Georgia Tech. I'm your host, Ellen Dunham-Jones, a professor in the School of Architecture, where I direct the Master of Science in Urban Design. Before I talk about today's episode, I just want to call your attention to two upcoming Redesigning Cities events on February 13th and March 10th. On February 13th, we'll be discussing the health and economic benefits of walkability with the researcher who coined the term walkability, Dr. Larry Frank, a former professor here at Georgia Tech in city planning, and one of the most cited scholars in the world, will share his research findings before having a conversation with Ilan Jha, a PhD candidate here. Then, on March 10th, we'll be sharing stories about the role of Atlanta's Sweet Auburn neighborhood in the civil rights movement. Cultural developer Gene Kansas and architect illustrator Clay Kinningham will present the extraordinary way their new book called Civil Sites tells these stories through the building's occupants and activities up and down Auburn Ave. It's a really remarkable book, and I think that will be a fabulous discussion. Today, we're continuing our series featuring highly impactful mayors and how they have redesigned their cities. Mayor Knox White of Greenville, South Carolina, clearly belongs in this category, and his presentation will provide powerful lessons for other communities who aspire to transform sleepy, kind of near-dead downtowns into thriving destinations. And he's going to include how to find your waterfall and how to further expand connectivity and community building for all. He'll tell you all about it. Now, after the mayor's presentation, Mike Messner will lead a conversation with the mayor on the economic, social, and environmental impacts of the changes under his leadership. Mike is a co-founder of Seminole Management and Equity Hedge Fund and is a professor of practice within the Scheller School of Business at Georgia Tech, where he teaches financing of green infrastructure and other topics. Through the Speedwell Foundation, Mike and his wife, Jenny, have been involved in various philanthropic efforts nationwide focused on urban parks and education, including sponsoring Redesigning Cities. Thank you, Mike. Mayor Knox White has been making the city of Greenville more beautiful, livable, and welcoming for 30 years as mayor. And that included tearing down a highway to create a park. A lawyer by training, he refused to allow subpar urban design or planning to demean his city. He's not trained in it, but he just said, I have a knack. I could see when design wasn't right. So he often fought with his city managers, sometimes council members, for the value of good design. Those fights paid off as he continued to be reelected and was made an honorary member of the American Society of Landscape Architects. Not many mayors can claim that. I think that's awesome. Welcome, Mayor White. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you all very much. Glad to be here. Honored to be here. And thank you, Professor Dunham-Jones, for inviting me. It's a real honor. And Mike, thanks for your sponsorship and all the students and everybody else who's here. It's great to be on the campus of Georgia Tech. My grandfather went to Georgia Tech, who I'm named for. Here's my name. Knox White. So anyway, somebody may remember him. I think he graduated like 1934, something like that. So anyway, glad to be back here. It's exciting to share the news about Greenville, South Carolina. I love the title of this program too, about redesigning cities. That's really kind of unusual to be sponsoring a program like that. They talk about cities in revitalization, redevelopment, but very seldom use the word redesign. And I've always been about design. I've always been redesigning the city, the psychology of people in a place, how they react to their environment. That's always been my obsession, and watching that and reading about it. And so it's a pleasure to be at a conference that really points that out and celebrates. So thank you very much for that. Greenville, South Carolina has had let me kind of backdrop. For nothing I have to do with, for whatever reason, we have a long tradition, 100 years back, of planning. I keep on my desk the 1907 Greenville Plan, written by a group from Boston that came to town. I've had it on my desk for all these many years. There's always been this unusual thing about the city having a plan and actually implementing the plan. So I adopted that. So it's been a good thing. And that 1907 plan is actually quite good. And we've taken even notes to it even today. We also have a great tradition as a community, and this is a cultural thing, by the way. I find this in cities, either kind of have it or don't. There's been a long cultural tradition of collaboration and partnerships. I don't even know why. It's in the water or something. But people still work together very well in Greenville. And that's true. And we get a lot of inner city visits, trips to Greenville now to look at our downtown. And you sort of figure out early that some communities sort of will say, yes, we partnership, collaborations. And other cities come to see us, large cities, small cities, and say, we don't do any of that. Nobody ever does that in the city. It's kind of a known fact. So I kind of paint cities in two different categories. Well, we have a good tradition of planning, urban design, and partnerships. And I ride that horse. And I can't even explain why, but we still do. So what I want to show you first up is about our downtown itself, because we were a classic American downtown 30 years ago. The shopping malls had opened. Everybody abandoned the downtown core, the city as a whole, but especially the main street. Classic story, you know the story. And so Greenville, by the way, between Charlotte and Atlanta, you see the street signs in Atlanta. We paid good money to have those advertisements, those billboards. So there's Main Street, Greenville in 1970s. The malls had opened. It was gutted. No one downtown, 4-lane road, kind of typical American city at the time. This is back in the 80s. At least we had some leadership, even then, that felt like perhaps woke up to it faster than most American cities, that this isn't going, the clock's not going to go back. We have to do something different, something drastic. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had a good team of folks and a former mayor who took a 4-lane street called Main Street and reduced it to 2 lanes, wide sidewalks, using a design group out of San Francisco, by the way, 1980, 81, 82, and created what we have today, which is a gorgeous tree-lined Main Street for about a quarter mile, wide sidewalks. And the idea behind that, again, was the downtown has to come back. We have to do something. And back in that era, there was American cities, there was a long gap there. Some cities just ignored it. It's never going to change. We're going to leave it the way it is. Or other cities began to work on it. And Greenville did. So we had the wide sidewalks and at least the idea of something different. The downtown's not going to come back like a shopping mall. It's not going to come back like it used to be, something different. And so an idea of walkability was kind of implanted in the design of the new Main Street. And there it was. And again, the trees grew out. Now today, that's what it looks like, and through the core of the city. But when I came along as mayor, 1995, 96, we had the beautiful trees. And they did look nice. And we had a performing arts center downtown already, the Peace Center, which is a spectacular performing arts center for Broadway shows and all that. We had an emerging restaurant scene, bars and restaurants. They're kind of the early adopters of most urban revitalizations, it seems. We had some of that beginning to happen. So we had some bits and pieces of those kind of things. But the truth is, and people who were in the city didn't quite see it this way sometimes because the trees look nice. We got these other ingredients. The truth is, there really were very few people walking under the trees. And the storefronts for block after block after block were still mainly empty storefronts. There was no retail downtown. There was a little bit, not much. It was mostly gone again. We had some restaurants and bars and that kind of thing. And I took advantage of some great opportunities early on to bring in designers from urban planners who gave us ideas. And I really attribute them a lot of the success we had to implant some key ideas. And the idea was to reinvent the downtown. We started with asking the question, what do we want to see? What do we want the downtown to be like, as any city should? And this is kind of what we envisioned. We said, okay, we want shops and stores and people on the street after 5 o'clock. and vibrancy, all kinds of different people. That's what we want to see. And we had glimpses of it even then, but we still didn't have that. So how do you make it happen? How does any city make it happen? Any section of town make it happen? And it's all about the fundamentals of really, I think two things. First and foremost is mixed use. And you all know that. When we say mix it up, when we have visitors, mix it up. You've got to have a good balance of office workers who are there from 9 to 5. And that's very important. Now we know after COVID how important that really is. We kind of lost sight of that for a while, but 9 to 5 office workers. But that can't be the end of it. Can't roll up the mat after 5 o'clock. So you need the other ingredients. All mixed use, by the way, is important. Theaters, churches, everything you can bring to the table. But the missing ingredient for most cities in America then, and even still now today, even though people are waking up to it, is the residential factor. And I believe that is a matter of religion now. That to have true mixed use and to have any success at the end of the day, you've got to have people living downtown, putting people there after 5 o'clock, on weekends, walking the dog, going to the coffee shop. It makes such a difference. So how in the world do you make mixed use happen, residential in particular, in a city like Greenville, South Carolina? No one to speak of was living downtown. And the very idea was kind of crazy. The market forces weren't there for it. Well, we got a little lucky because we started out working with, this is one building of many. We had a young fellow who moved back to Greenville from experience of living in Portland, Oregon. This is 1980s and 90s, and brought back some of those unusual ideas from Portland at that time, which is residential in an urban space. Very dramatic change for most cities in America at that time. And this building is a classic case. It's still there. This is about kind of the middle of downtown even now. He took this 19th century building, which was completely covered over, by the way, in aluminum. That was real big in the 60s and 70s. They covered up historic buildings everywhere, not just in Greenville, right here in Atlanta. They did it many times. Took all that stuff out, and there was the old building from 1888. And he put residential upstairs, retail in the bottom, and a coffee shop in the basement. This is 1985. There's no Starbucks anywhere, by the way. We had a coffee shop in the basement. He had lived in Seattle, in Portland. That's where we got the idea. I'm kind of digressing, but we had a decade or two where people would come to Greenville and go to the coffee shop and ask the question, what is this? What are these strange drinks? True story. And Coffee Underground is still there today. But there he was, perfect mixed use. And the fellow who did this, working with the city, this is kind of my education as mayor, he took me over here one day and he said, we focus on things like the sports arena. We had a big sports arena downtown for shows and things. We had the Performing Arts Center. But really to bring vibrancy to downtown, this is the model. If we can recreate this over and over and over again in our downtown, we'll have the downtown you want to have. People on the street, people living here, vibrancy all year round. And I never got that out of my head, that this became the model. Now, in the beginning, when he did all this, those residentials upstairs, he had to put his mother in there. And then, $300,000 condo, now they're worth $2 million. Years later, he would move his mother out of there, by the way. But so it started small, but we were able, working with him, and my urban planner advisors, consultants told me, you know what, this guy's he's doing everything you want someone to do. Help him. So he did about 10 of these in downtown. This is a time when you could come into downtown Greenville and buy almost any building you wanted to buy. And he bought about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 buildings along with a partner. And he did this in every one of them. Residential upstairs, even though people wouldn't buy them right away. Retail on the bottom. True mixed use. Over and over again. And this would become the model. He was very successful in doing that. And I point to this, and this is a good example for people with other smaller towns or somewhere along the line of doing this kind of work in early stages. Even when we grew from 0 people living downtown to 50 people maybe, and it happened in a pretty quick time. He did finally get some people to buy those apartments by hook and crook. Even with a few people living downtown, we saw a difference in City Hall. Suddenly we had people calling us on the phone, back in those days, people calling the phone, complaining about the streetlights not working or whatever it may be. The eyes and ears issue with parks and downtowns. And I can remember a time that my city manager said, those people, and I said, wait a minute, you're right. They're really obnoxious. They're the urban pioneers. But they're really doing everything we wanted someone to do. And isn't that great that somebody cares about that particular block of Main Street? We thought, yeah, we had that conversation, that this something's going on here. Even with 25 people, 50 people, it made a difference. Well, our next plan of action was, okay, we'll build second floor residential up and down Main Street. And by the way, today, downtown Greenville, from practically end to end, all the second floors are residential. I call it the legacy residential of our downtown. It's still there. It's still strong. It's stronger than ever. And it makes a difference having people living, second floor as opposed to 35th floor. But we knew that that still wouldn't do the job. We had to achieve a critical mass of residential to achieve the street vibrancy we were talking about. And that term, critical mass of residential, was what our urban planners would tell me. And of course, I would ask the question, well, how many do we need? And he would always say the same thing. You'll know it when you see it. That all. And so we had to do something. So instead of 4 units here and 6 units there and 7 units there, as good as that was, we intentionally, before the development community saw any value there, we, the city, decided we would do what we can to create opportunities for 50 units, 100 units. How would we do it? And we accidentally came upon something that the city owned a lot of property in the downtown. And this is very typical in most American cities, parking lots and various pieces. Even we were surprised what we owned. So we had a piece of property behind our city hall that was used for employee parking for city. We took that piece of property, there it was, I have an old picture of it. And people had never even thought about it before. We put it out and we said, put it out for an RFP. And we took bids. If to a developer, we didn't give it away, but we gave a nice low cost. But the point is, we said you could buy this property if you bring us a mixed-use development, if it included residential. And a guy from Charlotte, in this case, came down to Greenville and said, well, that looks like a good opportunity. And he built a project that is still there today, several hundred units of residential. Before the local folks in Greenville, the development community, saw much value in doing this, he did this, and surprise, surprise, it was successful. We liked that so much, we did this about 2 other times in our downtown. We found properties that we owned, we put them out for sale with the condition that they include residential. And we waited, but we got lucky. We had some people from out of town. The Charlotte developer, by the way, years later would tell me when he bought it, he didn't fully understand how Greenville's market was not quite there yet. There was a reason that no one else had done this, but he did relatively well until he did very well. And we did it over and over again. We took a 1970s parking garage about a block off of Main Street. It was falling apart. It looks like something Stalin would have built. Typical 1970s architecture. It was falling apart and we had to replace the garage. And we intentionally said, we're going to replace the garage. We're talking about residential. It's our property. We'll build residential into this garage. The architects at first said it's too small a site. And we said, well, could you make it more vertical? And maybe put residential on either end. We gave it a name, the Bookends Project. Can you create a Bookends Project? And they finally said, you know what, okay. And we did that early on. Suddenly about 150 units, still there today, still strong. And now we have apartments on one side, condos on the other, retail on the bottom. It was successful when people still weren't believing that this is actually going to happen in Greenville, that people actually want to live downtown. So we did this over and over again. And we began to create an amazing critical mass of residential that we have today in downtown. We took this very ugly building from the 1970s, is City Hall. By the way, soon to be renovated. And next to City Hall was a public plaza built in the 1970s. I'm picking on the 70s because everything they did in the 70s seemed to be wrong, 60s and 70s. And there was a parking garage underneath it. A public plaza next to it. And I can honestly say, we're sitting up the 10th floor as mayor, look down there, never saw a human being on that public plaza. Never saw a human being. One time my city manager, who worried about it too, said, well, how about let me do something like that, hot dog day for city employees on the plaza. And so employees came down, grabbed a hot dog and went back upstairs again. It was totally uninviting. We took this property, put it out on the market for mixed use. And by the way, and this is sitting right across from the Performing Arts Center, so location, owned by the city. We just had never seen this before in that light. We sold it, mixed use. We also included in the RFP that we wanted green space, public restrooms, And we'd like the green space to be convertible to an ice skating rink in the winter. And that's what we have today with the Marriott project right next to City Hall, with the ice skating rink in the winter and the green space in the summer, and restaurants all around the edges, et cetera, et cetera. So we did that kind of thing over again to make it happen. Today, downtown Greenville has massive residential development, 5,000 or 6,000 people living downtown in the inner core, and the market for condominiums and apartments, everything in between is very strong, and more being built all the time. But we still have the second floor residential. We still have the low rise mixed in with the high rise. So we have a good combination of both. So we began to rebuild the city with a classic case of mixed use, of the balance of office, retail, and residential. And mention the retail. Our best minds, consultants years ago used to say, we can recruit retail for our old downtown, but it's really not going to happen until you build the critical mass of residential downtown. I sort of believe that. He was absolutely correct. Today, we have national chains as well as local up and down Main Street from end to end. They're coming to us. We don't recruit anymore. So we've got all the retail you would ever want in the downtown core. But the second element of what we were trying to achieve in rebuilding the downtown and creating vibrancy, our consultants at the time, our urban planning documents and all, referred to it as personality, which is focus first on the mixed use to create the vibrancy, to get people to come downtown. But if you want people to come to your downtown, not just for a particular purpose, to shop or meet somebody for business, et cetera. If you want people just to come downtown just because they enjoy the place, they just want to be there, they want to be around other people, focus on what we called at that time personality. What do you have that makes you unique and different? And identify that and work with that and build on that. And don't try to do something that you're not. Don't be artificial. Don't build the Ferris wheel. Some Ferris wheels are okay, but the right spot. So we started out with basic things like historic preservation. We don't tear down any historic. This is the Poinsett Hotel, built 1920s. It's now a beautiful hotel in downtown, very popular. It was renovated in the year 2000. A lot of historic buildings. We're fortunate to have a good core of old textile mills and historic buildings in the core downtown. All of them have been converted into condominiums, residential, hotels, et cetera. We filled the downtown, again, with intentionality, with public art, all kinds of public art, abstract, different historic figures. Shoeless Joe Jackson, the baseball players on there from Greenville, all kind of tell a story. We have a lot of our public art is accessible. You can embarrass Mr. Poinsett in front of his hotel. We have children's art, and with this, Mice on Main is like a scavenger hunt where you try to find these bronze mice around downtown Greenville. It's extremely popular. It's now in its 20th year. It was the idea of a high school student who came to us with this notion. It was a project, and he'd actually been told no by the city, and he went to the top. He went to see the mayor as a high school student, and I thought it was compelling. It was based on the book Goodnight Moon, and I knew about that at the time. So this is very important. Now let me tell you why I'm a big fan of children's art. The kids grow up, and now it's not unusual for me to meet somebody who's in their early 30s and they're coming back to live in Greenville. And they have this attachment to the city, as you'll see in other ways too, with the river and everything we've done downtown. And they often talk about, it started with Mice on Main. And I think, wow, it matters. And by the way, the children's art, when you come to downtown Greenville, most of you in this room will never see it. You've got to be about 4 or 5 years old to even find it. That's the way that works. And then finally, personality. We were asking ourselves, again, with intentionality, what do we have that makes us unique and different? Now, I know this seems strange, but this is a picture from 1888. We have a waterfall, a serious waterfall adjacent to Main Street. This is in the middle of the downtown, along a small river called the Reedy River that runs through our downtown. And in 1880s, early 20th century, the waterfall was the most important thing in Greenville. Everybody went there. It's written in diaries. It's the first place you took your visitors to the waterfall. But during the early 20th century, Greenville grew quite rapidly and became a textile center. So textile mills were created up and down the river. And you know what they did? Like every American city, they dumped everything in the river. And so through the 20th century, the river that ran through the city and the waterfall became polluted. And by 1960, this is how bad was it? In 1960, the Highway Department of South Carolina placed a 4-lane highway directly on top of the waterfall, totally obliterating your ability to even see it. To get down to it, you had to really work at it to go visit it. And over many decades, the city and the people moved away from the water, moved away from the waterfall. So the river area became warehouses and blighted buildings, and downtown was kind of up several blocks away from this. And this is the way it was for many decades. Well, about the time 1980s and 90s, the river became cleaner. The textile mills went out of business, and the river became cleaner. And some people began to understand. There was a garden club, Carolina Foothills Garden Club, that worked down the park for years, and they had a vision of building something great, a garden around this waterfall, except for the fact that it was covered over by a highway bridge. And over the course of decades, we're talking 40 or so years, most people who lived in Greenville no longer had a memory of the waterfall. They didn't know it was there, except maybe in the history books, they see a picture. So it was kind of a hard sell. After I was reelected as mayor, I say that because it's not profiles encouraged. I was reelected as mayor, okay? I got serious about the waterfall. It became kind of the third rail issue in our community to take down the bridge. Everybody called it the perfectly good bridge, like that was the name. It was a convenience to use it. And the idea of taking down the bridge began to percolate, and people, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. You know, we're not going to take down that bridge. But we worked with the garden club, began to kind of spread the news. But I would have to still say, after a year or two of effort, it was still an issue you didn't want to get too close to. There's another view of the bridge. And the whole area around it, again, was deserted and forgotten, and literally forgotten. Well, after a couple of years into this, probably around the year 2000, those of us in the garden club, myself and a few others, we put the vision together. We had a group out of Boston that put together a vision of the park, what it would look like without the bridge, a beautiful garden around the waterfall. And we tried to sell it. But basically, the argument still with most people was, we're proposing to build a beautiful park around a waterfall you've never seen. Trust us, for $18 million. It says 12.5. It was actually 18, I think, at the end. And didn't go so well. This was important, though. Back in the early 2000s, we still had, and every American city still had, a newspaper of record. Everybody read the same newspaper. And if something was important, you could put it in there. Went to the Greenville News, and I said, would you put on the front page a depiction of the park we're talking about? Everybody's talking about the bridge, removing the bridge. What a bad idea. We want to change the subject, the park. And they did it for me. I can't say it changed everything, but it helped a lot. For the first time, people saw what the real issue was here. Do you want to trade one for the other? I had a member of city council, though. He was vehemently, one particular member, vehemently against taking down the bridge. This appeared in the newspaper, and he actually called me up and he said, you know, I saw that depiction and that is really beautiful. I've just never seen it that way. I want to come and talk to you about it. And I said, great. So he came by my office and I was so excited about that. He said, I think this is really, world class and could be nice, but I think we're going about this all the wrong way. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, instead of taking down the bridge, we should move the waterfall. Now, I couldn't do what you just did. I had to sit there going, how would you do that? He said, dynamite. When he left my office, I remember this like yesterday. When he left my office, I just thought, man, this is not going well at all. Well, long and short is, we elected some new people to city council. They didn't have the attitude about it like the old ones did. And frankly, as one of them told me later, they didn't really fully understand how controversial this was going to be. So they voted for it to take down the bridge. And for about 2 years during the construction, they caught a lot. This is a picture of the demolition process. The newspaper at the time wrote a nice piece, because the newspaper did support me on this, always, always. They said, for the first time in 40 years, the sun shone on Reedy River Falls, which was pretty nice for journalism. Kind of poetic. Notice in this picture, there's nothing around the waterfall on the upper left side. You'll see just parking lots, and it was really worse than depicted there, just an open area. It took 2 years to build the park. And in 2004, with a lot of fanfare, newspaper, TV, advertisements, and all, we went from that to this. And thousands of people came down to see it. And it's hard to put this into words, what it was like for most people who walked across the pedestrian suspension bridge. It's the first time they've ever seen the waterfall, even if they lived here all their lives. Because I realized later it was really hard, what a hard argument politically. And I didn't see this when I was living it as much as I did in retrospect, to make an argument about something where most people had never seen the waterfall. So how were they supposed to understand what we were trying to do? They understood later. And so Falls Park, we hoped at the time when we built the park, it's like the Beltline in Atlanta. You build it, you're still not sure how people are going to receive it. We didn't really know. We used to talk about, will it become, I said it would become the centerpiece of our city, what we're known for, what our identity is as we see ourselves. But I didn't really know that would be true. I hoped it would be. Well, today, for example, when the NBC affiliate and the Fox affiliate open the evening news every night, it's the waterfall. First thing they show. That's Greenville. And everyone feels it. So it's beyond that. It illuminates at night. The pedestrian suspension bridge is a real piece of art and engineering. And it really is the centerpiece of our city. And then here's what happened next. This is a picture of the block across the street from Falls Park on Main Street when it opened. And I can tell you, it was almost a mile of buildings like that beyond that. Blighted, deserted buildings around the waterfall. Within 3 years, that became this. And we went on from there. That's River Place on the left. Mixed use, because everything we do in the city of Greenville, even today, is mixed use. So on the left is River Place. It's condos, it's apartments, it's multiple hotels, multiple restaurants, shops and stores along the river. That's the Performing Arts Center complex on the right-hand side. That other piece is kind of interesting. This is the first leg of what we have. It's our Beltline. It's called the Swamp Rabbit Trail, an old rails to trail project. Starts on Main Street. It goes for 19 miles up the river, and it goes another 20 miles the other direction now. But in the beginning, this was the first leg of what became the Swamp Rabbit Trail. This is where the first section didn't go very far, but we began to realize, people kind of like this, walking along the trail, riding bikes, etc. Now the whole city is surrounded, and that's a section of the Swamp Rabbit as it moves up the river again for nearly 20 miles. And so that's what we have today. This now goes in all different directions. So that's what we may have inner city visits and people coming to Greenville to look at our downtown. We talk about mixed use a lot. We say, if you want an example of why mixed use works, the magic of mixed use is you're putting people on the street, not just 9 to 5, but 24/7. And people like to be with people. Just try it. But you better get residential in there. If you don't have that, you're probably never going to achieve the kind of mixed use you want to have. And then finally, we tell people, find your falls. And some people, of course, say, well, you got a waterfall. And I just have to remind you again, Greenville didn't know it had a waterfall. And we've had a lot of cities visit Greenville, and they come back and say, well, we do have something that we'd never thought about. We've got an old rail yard that we want to renovate. So that's your personality. That's who you are. That's what you should go with. Now, that's about mixed use, but I want to show you a little more since Mike likes parks. We had so much fun with that project that we went up the river about a quarter mile, not far at all. Again, the trail is already up the river. And we had this area, abandoned warehouses, kind of a junkyard area of Greenville, but just outside of downtown. And again, along the river, the trees there, we had a section of the river that was almost covered over by vegetation and such. And that's what it looked like only about 5 years ago. We took this area town and we saw the same potential there. What if we could reinvent this area? Same way we did Falls Park. There was an aerial there of this industrial area, again, quarter mile from Falls Park. And we had a vision, something like that. What if we got all the junk out of there, all the warehouses, created green space, developed it? Really proud of this. It was designed by one of the guys who designed Falls Park. Then we took this out to the neighborhood. It was it is today, surrounded by a predominantly African-American neighborhood historically. And we had a neighborhood meeting, very important, but this around 2016, 17, maybe a little earlier than that, actually. And the reaction in the neighborhood was amazing. We had about 100 plus people at the meeting. And the president of the neighborhood association, whose name is Mary Duckett, there's Mary, stood up and said, we love this plan. Our neighborhood has always resented the fact that for a century, the city has always put its junk in our backyard. And I thought, that's fairly true. And this plan looks great, except one problem. We're not a part of the plan. And I always appreciate the fact she said that many, many years ago. Well, it says 2013, yeah. And we changed that. We literally took the plan and ripped it in two, even though we thought it was a nice plan. And we started over a long process. When she said they had junk in their backyard, let me just show you this. It's a picture from the 1960s, but it's kind of classic. So what was in the backyard of that neighborhood? The neighborhood's over to the left, and there's another on the right. What was in their backyard? Well, there was a women's jail. There was public works, had trucks and vehicles and garbage trucks and things like that. There was two public dumps. There was believe it or not, a police shooting range. And that becomes particularly significant when you understand that the police shooting range was placed right next to a children's playground in the 1930s. This is like 1939, 1940, something like that. And but it was the only African-American park in the entire city of Greenville in that era. 1930s, 1940s. This is where the African-American park was, on the edge of this neighborhood. In 1939, remember Mary Duckett said that the city has been talking about this for a long time, and in terms of the neighborhood, they said that she said that many years ago the city actually promised us a park, and we didn't know what she was talking about. And we did the research and worked with her. We found these articles. 1939, the city of Greenville promised to clean up the area and build a park, and it was led by a fellow gentleman, Mr. Holloway, who was the first black postman in the city of Greenville, by the way, and college educated, and he was the big advocate. The city promised. They said, okay, the big crowd at City Hall, we'll do something about this. 1939, never did. But Mary and her neighborhood remembered that. And I'd born and raised in Greenville. I had never heard that story before. And I told them that. So we started over. For almost 5 years, we held neighborhood meetings. It became their project. What do you want to see in your park? Lots of green space. The bike trail runs right through the middle. Children's playgrounds, of course. We had one neighborhood meeting where the children in the neighborhood came to the meeting. Get back to kids again and their participation. And it was in that meeting where some kids said, we want a spring park, a water park. And I was at the meeting. I remember thinking, well, that's not in the plan. That's not in the budget. We added that to it. And so it became very much on a granular level, their park. And the leadership of that neighborhood was and is still. So that's sort of an aerial of a section of it just 5 or 6 years ago. And this is Unity Park today. It's called Unity Park because there was once a black park and a white park. And now the bigger park is called Unity Park. And we tell the story in the park, all about it. Good guys, bad guys, good things, bad things. It's all told. And what's really wonderful, the people in Greenville all know the story now. They all know about Reverend Holloway. They all know about the 1930s. Everyone knows the story now in Greenville. And the embrace of this park by the people in the Greenville has been just unbelievable. It has always got, I don't know, a few thousand people there. You can walk to it from downtown. Children's playgrounds, lots of green space. The trail, again, trail system runs right through the middle of the park. The river that you once couldn't see is now very beautiful. Across the middle, and there's the children's spray park. Public-private partnership, major contributions from BMW, Michelin, foundations, individuals. Almost $20 million of private donation. And Mary Duckett lived to see it. Now, supplement to this whole story about my friend Mary. There was one piece of the park, a couple pieces we had to finish up. We had to build a wetlands. I have wetlands area of the park. It's very nice. And then there's this. In the original park plan with the neighborhood, they said, we want our park to be as wonderful as Falls Park, something like the Liberty Bridge, which is the suspension bridge. What would it be? And through that process came this idea of an observation tower, about 10 stories tall. Why? The neighborhood leadership said, we have children in the neighborhood who have never seen the mountains. And Greenville's very close in the mountains. You can actually see western North Carolina from downtown Greenville. And so the idea of we used a bucket truck. I don't know if I have that picture. There it is. Yeah, the councilman from the district used a bucket truck. How high do you want it to be? That's how we made the decision. The mayor did not ride the bucket truck. Have you ever ridden the bucket truck? It's, but Lillian did, and Reverend Mills. It became kind of a big message for them. We want people to know that this park is as special as Falls Park. Has a piece of architecture that's unique and iconic. We hired a design group out of Los Angeles, and we worked on it for 3 or 4 years. We raised private money again. About half the cost of this was private money, the other half public money. And just a few weeks ago, we opened the Honor Tower, the 10-story observation tower in the heart of the park. And I want you to know it became a passion project for everybody, but especially Mary Duckett. And this is Mary on the day the Honor Tower opened. That's the governor of South Carolina to her left. I'm taking the picture. And Mary got to go up in the Honor Tower. And I kid you not, she died a few days later. And we just were like, can't believe this. And we did something else with the neighborhood. This area is changing fast. We saw it in Falls Park. You saw all that beautiful development we have around it. And none of that's affordable. Around this neighborhood, with a vulnerable neighborhood around it, with gentrification happening and displacement happening already, the city did something else. Back in 2018, we looked at this map of the future park area, and we knew something. All those yellow parcels, in fact, there's actually a few more now, are owned by the city of Greenville. They're all prime pieces of real estate today because they're adjacent to Unity Park. And sure enough, $1 million plus condos had sprouted all over that area near the park, except the best real estate is owned by the city of Greenville. In 2018, we donated all of our property to the Housing Trust Fund for Affordable Housing in Greenville. And today we have underway what will be the largest single footprint of affordable housing and workforce housing, and really in the entire city, on the edge of Unity Park. This is the first project that's actually coming on the ground now. Several others right behind it. And that was part of our commitment to the neighborhood and to the leadership. This park would truly be for everyone. And that's what we did. That's our promise fulfilled. Mural as you come into the park. And Mr. Holloway's family, we found them all over the world, invited them to the grand opening of the great-grandfather they'd never met, but they all knew they had a great-grandfather who was once postman of a place called Greenville, South Carolina. And they lived in Puerto Rico, they lived in Texas, they lived in Florida. We got them back to Greenville and had a great reunion for them, for the park they did. And that is the story of Unity Park. Thank you very much.
Became mayor, and first you were city council.
Yeah.
And did you go into politics with these type of vision beforehand, or once you were involved with the city, did you embrace all this effort that you've done?
To a large degree, I did, because I ran for mayor as a Greenville native with a sense of, we're like, people can relate to Atlanta and Greenville. It's a fast-growing area. And I was always focused on quality of life, that if we're going to be growing this fast, we've got to balance growth with quality of life. And we only have kind of one opportunity to do it. So we have to grab those opportunities now or lose them forever. So my focus as running for mayor was about neighborhoods and quality of life. I threw it out there. I defeated a three-term mayor. Because we're even back then getting nervous about pace of growth, and they weren't paying much attention. So things like the Falls Park story, it just wasn't happening. People weren't serious about moving the business. So I'd say, so to some degree, that's about as far as it went. Quality of life, livability, quality of life, and that was going to be our engine of economic development. That was my argument. And people thought, other people at the time thought, no, there are two. There's can't be pro-business economic development, can be for green cities and parks and those kind of things and trails. But I thought we could, and I think it should be that.
And so when you talk about parks and green space, there's no revenue these groups. So you have to figure out where you get the revenue from existing revenue sources from the city.
Oh, but yeah.
And so tell us about where you're getting the revenue from and the returns that
yeah, well, it is all about return on investment. Showed the pictures of before and after, and that's now, I had to make that argument for so many years, but now it's open. Everybody understands that these things add value. We're fortunate to have some ability to do these things with some instruments, vehicles such as hospitality tax. We have a food and beverage tax in South Carolina. Things are always different in those states. 2% food and beverage, and by under state law, it can only be spent for tourism-related projects. And parks are considered tourism-related projects. So that different fund money has grown mightily, but that's how we funded Falls Park, 100% with hospitality tax. And later, we fund also Ely Park, and our hospitality tax revenues have grown from something like 8 or 9 million in the beginning to almost 20 million today. So it's very healthy. We can still do big things on this tourism related. We're fortunate we had a bit of ability to do it.
Right. And how's the population changed since you became mayor, and how's the mix of the population changed? I mean, I hear about, at my age, you hear about these things, but retirees like to go to Greenville. But at the same time, seems like you have young people.
No, it's just when I came in, the population was very old, and we were a classic county where Greenville County is today. Greenville County is the largest county in South Carolina. Greenville City wasn't growing; it was stagnating. It was losing population for decades. County was growing robustly. We were the donut hole, basically. What we could move back and see and that's what happens in a lot of places. So we were the donut hole. We have totally reversed it. The county is still much larger than the city, but the city is the fastest growing segment, the most desirable place to be. Our average age is 34. You see, so it's a very youthful population. We do a lot of retirees and those expensive condos downtown from all over the country. But the demographics and everything else get more diverse, younger, more dynamic. And the place to be is, if you can't be downtown, you want to be near downtown. You want to be on Swamp River Trail. All those conditions growing tremendously. Renovation, young families back in the city. I came in there were so few young families, and almost count on one hand most of our neighborhoods today. Just the opposite. Everybody to buy a house in cities.
And talking about that, have you seen people with their suburban house, with their big backyard, saying, you know what, I can go to Greenville, live downtown, have the amenities of downtown with a nice park, so I don't need my own park?
Love it. We also have a strong foreign investment community in town. BMW has been with us for many decades. Michelin's been even longer. It's a lot of French, a lot of Germans. You hear a lot of German on the street. You almost have to hear that. You'll hear Italian, you'll hear French. They really love it disproportionately because it's very European. Downtown, it's walkable, it's green, it's got the shops and stores, it's got the restaurants galore, coffee shops everywhere now. And it's got all those things. So we get that community, if you will. And yeah, the people from the suburbs and the city is extremely common. That happens like all the time. And we love the amenities downtown provides. Downtown Greenville also.
They don't have to mow that park.
As opposed to the park system, it's just lowered your blood pressure. It works that way very well.
Yeah. So, does the city need a natural attraction like your falls to do this same thing?
Yeah, I really believe it does. I think even the mixed use argument about that, you're still going to create a destination, but it's kind of, you're there for a purpose, and that's fine, and that's important. In fact, it's critical for the vibrancy and the vitality of that community. But if you want something more, if you want it to be a kind of a city with a heart, it's all the reasons people love any city they love. It's got elements, might be historic buildings. It's things that make it unique and different, all that I think are so important.
Now, it seems like Greenville sort of did it on a very incremental basis. One block at a time, almost. One major investment.
It kind of worked that way. We didn't know it at the time, but we kind of moved down the street. So the Performing Arts Center, the hotel, and that led to the river, and then beyond the river to a mixed-use baseball stadium. And so it kind of worked that way.
So how do you feel from the perspective of some of these cities trying to think they can do it all from the top down with major, aren't we playing this big gulch down that way?
Well, that gulch is important because Atlanta's doing all the right things, and you have different sections that are neighborhoods that stand alone over the decades as having an authenticity and having an identity that's not like everyone else. And that's really our secret sauce in our downtown. I think it goes for any city. You want to have a city be a great city of neighborhoods, be a great city of different communities. So you can choose which one you want to live in, for one thing. You may like a suburban look. You may want something that's more traditional neighborhood design, zero lot lines and that kind of thing. Have a little bit of everybody, different kind of communities.
Okay. Do you have any questions coming in?
I do. I will. Let me start with actually one of my own questions, but also just remind the audience. Go to slido.com to post questions. There are quite a lot of them on here, and the code 106-1719. Pretty sure. Yes, Slido code is 106-1719. So I'm always going to say,
Oh, that's you. Behind it.
I'm going to just
Kind of backtrack too. I drove it on.
So mixed-use main streets are tried and true. And you guys just did a fabulous, fabulous job. Trail-oriented development is kind of a newer pattern. Greenville is absolutely blessed to have both. Atlanta, we're kind of having a moment with trail-oriented development. We're still working on really trying to get the walkable Main Street retail. We have bits of it, but what are your thoughts? What is your advice do you think there's more of a market, more of an opportunity to distinguish yourselves with one or the other, or?
Well, I think one of the lessons for city redevelopment, when we had people, cities come to visit Greenville, to really pound on them this message you've heard me speak in acknowledgement about mixed use and what it means and being intentional about it. Curating, literally curating block by block. You have enough mixed use, here's a residential problem. Back here, you get your balance. You have to constantly work at it. But the other thing is, you might be successful. Then you have the issues of affordability. So many things are worth so much more. And people in the early stages of development, the thing we really try to talk about is you might use that early stage to remember to preserve some land for affordability and housing. And I think the trail development is the same way. We're experiencing great growth along our trail as well. Go through some wonderful natural areas in the woods and that kind of thing within certainly Pop Valley or other things happening. And we're trying to be intentional about, just like downtown as a whole, carving out areas along the way we can put aside for affordable housing and making sure we do that.
Oh, I mean,
before it could flip the cows out of the barn.
Well, exactly. And which it kind of, I mean, a lot of people at the Beltline in Atlanta has received a lot of flack for early on not really enforcing the affordable housing requirements. And in part because back in like 2005-06, affordable housing wasn't the issue. We wanted more people. Housing, period.
Just saying the third to downtown, we were having giving away property at that time, and we didn't think affordable. We just wanted somebody to do something downtown. And I think of trail developments along, as I see them around the country, it's kind of the same thing. You believe it, but you don't believe it. You want it to happen so badly that you're not so focused on, well, what if you're successful? And I think the lesson now is you really probably are going to be successful. It's hard to believe now any community has looked at trail systems anywhere in America now. There's lots of examples. And the message is loud and clear. These are extreme, amazing vehicles of economic development. There's no doubt about it. And so start thinking about you have the right balance. You have what you want on the trail.
No, we still want to get more walkable main streets going for downtown. But
and the suburban streets are awful.
Yeah. So lots of questions come in. And a lot of them from Anonymous. Anonymous asked, was the bridge over the waterfall a South Carolina DOT bridge? And if so, how did you work with the state to remove it? Please tell.
Very well, Anonymous, you've asked a very observant question, and we'll get into it. We didn't own it. And so we went through all this public debate and angst and controversy. At the end of the day, I knew no matter what we do, we don't own the bridge. The state of South Carolina owns it. And here we had a minor miracle. At the very time we had begun to make progress on taking down the bridge, state of South Carolina, the governor had just appointed a new director of the highway department, the first female. And we had to make an appointment to go down to see her. And we were nervous about that because we were going to go meet this new director of the highway department. Her name is Mary Maker. And Betty Maker, I'm sorry. Betty Maker. We're going to meet with her and say, hey, we'd like you to give us the bridge. Can you share that? Just 2 weeks before the visit to Columbia State Capitol, found out that Betty Maker, in the new position, was the director or the chairman of the Council of Garden Clubs in Columbia, South Carolina.
That's pretty good.
And Harry White, who was the president of the garden club that I mentioned, the Carolina Foothills Garden Club, that really had the vision for decades about building a beautiful park around the waterfall. She was the one who called the bridge the concrete monster and all that, but had the vision. I called up Harriet and said, Harriet, it's got some really interesting news. This Betty Maker we're visiting, she's had a Columbia County Garden Club. And Harriet said, oh, that Betty Maker. I know her. So Harriet called her, and long and short, she said, it was great. She said, Harriet, you don't come down here, I'm coming up there. And she did. She walked under the bridge, saw the highway bridge on top of the waterfall. And I remember exactly what she said. She said, you know, in my job now, you can't build something within a mile of snail daughter. Remember the snail daughter issue? And look what they did. And she committed to us, I'm going to work with you on this. I'm going to work with you. And she got the job done. Within about 6 months, we got a bridge easy to see with no questions asked.
Wow.
That would have never happened. I lived through many highway department directors before and after, and I don't think that would have ever happened. Amazing story, but good question.
Absolutely.
Oops, we don't own it.
Yeah, at school, we do a lot of those projects and proposals where we don't really know who owns things, but you never know. But see, you make that proposal, sometimes you're going to get lucky. Wow.
Get lucky a lot along. Just like the guy from Portland, Oregon comes back to Greenville.
You won't all
mean, really, you know?
You got to ask at least.
Yeah. Another, maybe the same anonymous, maybe another one, asked, how did you figure out the right mix between owner and rental for downtown, especially in the new construction?
Well, it really evolved, and most of the early was rental. At that period where you were desperate for anyone to live there, and you could get someone to rent was hard enough. Getting someone to buy something was even more impossible to see. Over time, it converted. I think now, and really happened kind of quickly, we still have a very strong mix of townhomes, condominiums, ownership with rental downtown, which I think is great. Have both of them there because they have more sense of ownership community. But it just kind of evolved. The market controls that really, and it moved in a really good direction for us in downtown.
Fantastic. Is it true? Dagmar asks, is it true that you found, so you mentioned that you hear a lot of German on the street. Yeah. Is it found that you found some inspiration for good urban design in Germany?
Yeah, absolutely, or Europe in general. The whole downtown design is focused on walkability, first and foremost. We like to say we like to give people a surprise around every corner. So lots of public art, lots of water features, things we kind of toy with in downtown Greenville, good urban design. If we put something somewhere and it's not working, we might pick it up and move it. You always have something to see, something to experience, in addition to making sure all the retailers have the right kind of room displays. So it's all part of the mix, but it's all about walkability. And the public art in any city is about art, the message of the piece, but it's also about walkability. That's about how you feel about that block, that section.
Absolutely. Well, now, so picking up on the mobility, is there any plan to expand public transit in Greenville and link it with land use?
It's very interesting here in the story of Beltline, because I know that the original idea was transit on Beltline. It issues some controversy, but it's very expensive to do that. Same thing in Greenville. The Swamp River Trail, as it originated when the trail was originally bought by the county years ago. The idea was buying it for sometimes $90 one day. So we had the same evolution where people said, well, in the meantime, it should be buying. And now you could imagine taking that away, getting a place. So I wouldn't give us high kudos with the trolley system in the city and some things like that to supplement the basic transportation system. But in downtown core, it's amazingly walkable and very safe too, by the way. The other thing about downtown, when you walk right at 10 o'clock, and I'm not just saying this is true, 10 o'clock, 11 p.m. And it's perceived to be very safe and walkable. There's always people down at the river, always.
You don't need transit if everybody's living near their job.
You don't need as much parking. I mean, are you reducing parking ratios, or is it assumed that, no, we're small enough town, people want to get out into the mountains, everybody's going to have a car, have a car or two?
Or at least if you park your car downtown, you can park it and leave it there.
How about safety downtown? How has that changed over that?
Well, it's got like the early resident at the beginning of downtown Greenville's evolution. And downtown was not only deserted, it wasn't safe either. It had a notorious reputation, especially around the river. Those areas were bad. I'm talking, daylight crime and that kind of thing. That's all gone. And even the earliest days of residential downtown, people living there. The old adage about eyes and ears and street and parks is so true, because it really did make a difference. And even to this day, there's just a lot of people living there. And, it's part of the safety issue. A gentleman called me. We built a baseball stadium beyond Falls Park, mixed-use stadium, and residential condos built into the stadium, which is like, everybody's doing that now. But at that time, we had a lot of pushback from developers. We'll do baseball. We're not going to park. We built, retail residential into the stadium right on Main Street. That particular area was so dangerous that some of the existing businesses along there, they actually required their employees to carry guns. And there was a time about 5 or 6 years after the baseball stadium was built, that one business garage was actually called me up, but I didn't know. Telling me that they had been out to talk to employees today that they're no longer required to carry a gun. And I thought,
that's
what to get in there. I said, I wanted to call you and tell you. Just, and I didn't realize that that it was that.
What? You've told us, you've shared so many incredible success stories. Are there the projects that got away? Have there been some disappointments or some, some that you worked on, you tried, but things got in the way? Couldn't happen.
No. No, everything took so damn long. That's why I'm here 30 plus years. Everything takes a long time. 5 years at Unity Park. A lot of obstacles, political and otherwise, and expense and this kind of thing. Unity Park was built in here. I can't tell you how bad that area was. Just to clean it up, it's like a Herculean task. And to see a vision of this area might be a place people actually might come by the thousands to enjoy. It's like, but those are the kind of obstacles. But I wouldn't say anything. I think part of it is having that overall vision of what we're trying to achieve. And again, about street vibrancy, safety, walkability, green and trees and water, all those kind of good things. And we just kind of stick to that. I think if we got off that topic, we might have ourselves a real mess and something. But
talk about Mayberry Park there. This will be there.
That was the historic black park in Greenville. And even though it was a very small park, even though it's sitting, no kidding, next to a police firing range.
Right.
You believe that? People in the neighborhood would say, this has been back in the 1940s. So, probably in the 50s, they had memories of their mom and dad saying to them, "Hey, if they start firing on the firing range, come home." We heard those stories. We also heard the stories, and then saw the evidence of people who
segregated
the neighborhood. Yeah, stories that a lot of the neighbors had bullet holes in their houses, and I remember that meeting. I'm thinking, say that again. What do you mean? And I'd go see it later, and that came from errant bullets from a firing range adjacent to a playground, adjacent to a neighborhood. Hey, life in the city in 1930s and 40s, unbelievable.
But now you turned it into a really good neighborhood baseball field again, right?
Oh, yeah, that's just a little subset of a much larger park. But one thing we did, despite the history of the neighborhood, there was a lot of attachment to the old traditional park that people grew up in playing baseball, et cetera. So part of our early commitment was we're going to take the historic park called Mayberry Park and turn it into a world-class park within Lodge Park. And we have the best Little League baseball thing in the Western world, probably. It's got to be developed more so you can imagine. And again, a lot of private funding as well. But there's a lot of attachment to it. This is part of telling the story, keeping the history alive, and doing what the neighborhood really wanted to see done.
And have you seen the racial animosity declined substantially, or,
Well, it's a whole.
racial situation in Greenville?
Well, I would just say this, Unity Park has exceeded anybody's expectation. It's a gathering place like none other. The whole downtown really is, to tell you the truth. The tree covered walk, everybody loves going downtown. People who live in Greenville love their downtown. It's like unbelievable. When I was growing up, it was always, why is the city wasting money on that? You never hear that in Greenville. I mean, you do not, because if you visit your friends and neighbors in Greenville, the first place they will take you before you get out of the car is down to Falls Park. They want to show you Falls Park. And now they want to show you the Honor Tower, Unity Park, and all the other things they walk on. So the pride of it is just astounding. And there's no barriers on it. Everybody feels it. But Unity Park definitely speaks to diversity of the community. And the story is so real and authentic. And you see it, and the audience is down. It is everybody's down. And that happened on the first day it opened. We getting the message out, calling it Unity Park, talking about Reverend Holloway and the story of how we got there. We all, Mary Duckett, I used to talk about it. Are people hearing the message, or are they just seeing this as park? First week, she told me, oh yeah, everybody is. This is our fault. Everybody.
So kind of picking up on the time it takes, and then especially when you that you had to tear up the community plan, the plan that you already had, and start over with Unity Park. Another anonymous asks, do projects inevitably take longer with neighborhood input? And how do you contend including residents in the vision without execution feeling dated once it's complete? If it just takes that long, I mean, you've got the kids have graduated high school who played in, others, does it get dated?
And everyone lives it too. If you participated at some level, and you remember following progress. Probably there is some frustration. It does take a long time. But then again, once construction starts, it's okay. I always say, the first time you can hit that shovel in the ground, do it. Because people need to see progress. And I think in the case of Unity Park, like Falls Park, what's also wonderful is all the renderings that we showed ad nauseam. Here's what the children's spring park is going to look like. Here's what the playground is going to look like. Here's what everything does. Everything looks to a T exactly as displayed. And that's something that I think that's kind of one of the things everybody talks about. So, oh my gosh, it looks exactly as supposed to. And by the way, the area has a long line of old warehouses that are still in the park along the river, and they were all vacant. And today they're all renovated. And we have a food court, kind of a mini version of Ponce Market, big food court section, bicycle shops, architect offices, tech businesses, all along the river, on both sides of the river, lots of food and beverage in the park. So you don't have to go out of the park to get food and beverage. You can stay there the whole day with the family because it's all there, food, beverage, bicycle shops. So kind of got lucky there. We had the right partners to renovate those buildings. Wasn't in the original plan to renovate those buildings like that, but what a perfect complement to a park to have ice cream and hot dogs and hamburgers and everything in between right there in the park.
Yep. Do you get any revenue fees for that to help maintain the park? Revenue share?
No, we've been
You're leasing it.
Now, the property taxes from this area in the past 6 or 7 years, I did look at this number just recently, actually, before the park or early days of the park, the entire area produced about, I want to say 200 something thousand in property taxes. I know this is kind of relative, but today it produces almost 2 million property taxes. That's property taxes, get business licenses, hospitality taxes, all those restaurants and everything else back into our general fund.
Actually, on talking about the food, one of the questions was, how did Greenville become a significant culinary destination?
Yeah, we have some, even the early adopters, Carl Sobczynski is one in particular, there's several others now, started opening restaurants. I think the Performing Arts Center was a major driver of that. Large audiences coming down for the Broadway shows and other things at the Peace Center. And it's the largest facility of that kind in South Carolina. And that helped the restaurant world with strong, good individual, good partners, Took old buildings, fixed them up, made them into restaurants, and it's just exploded now. Now we have a really fantastic culinary scene and chef. We have a Michelin star chef and a lot of great opportunities and diversity of food downtown.
Oh, there's so many questions coming in. Thank you, Paul.
I like coffee. I'm a big coffee person. I'm in Nirvana. We have at one time we had 3 Starbucks. I think we're down to 2, but we had about 15 independent coffee shops up and down the street. And Coffee Underground is still in business. The woman who started, but she was pushing a coffee cart in the I guess in the mid 80s, pushing a coffee cart when this fellow I told you about came up to her, who moved from back to Greenville from Portland, Oregon, came up to her and said, this is going to get coffee. How would you like to have a brick and mortar coffee shop? She was like, a miracle. Took her downstairs and she created coffee and went out with the kind of the sofas and chairs and all that kind of look that seems so unusual. And Dana Lowry's her name, and she still owns Coffee Underground today.
That's
fabulous. A little coffee shop. We have a lot of coffee shops. They're all great. But that
reminds me of one of the case studies I've been interested in Cincinnati. The neighborhood of Pleasant Ridge, a little bit more suburban, but it had 2 blocks of a downtown that was complete there. Those 2 blocks were dead. And a bunch of residents formed a committee. They found out that if they could get themselves designated a community entertainment district, the cost of a liquor license would go down from $25,000 to $2,500, and it would mean you could carry a beer open carry on the street.
Cool.
So then they went after all that was like in the food trucks have been operating for maybe only 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And so they hit up all the food truck operators and says, are you getting tired of driving around? Would you like a real brick and mortar location? Yeah. And they filled up their main street.
That's a good
remarkably quick.
Yeah, we've had a strong hospitality, hotel, culinary scene for some time. Great leadership, great personalities, and that is absolutely a great way to build part of the building block. So really getting back to mixed use is all part of mixed use. It's one of the elements of mixed use. You got to.
So are you going to fall into the issue as it's gotten so crowded, no one goes there anymore?
I don't think so. Some people think so. I don't. But, we keep expanding the footprint. I mean, the very definition of our downtown, this is kind of typical, the very definition has tremendously expanded. Mm-hmm. And the psychology of going downtown, what does that mean? It used to just be one place, down the Circle Hotel, the Hyatt Hotel, and just downtown. But now it's expanded on. And of course, Unity Park pushed it out to deliver even further. So that's probably the best way to respond to that.
Well, that's weird. Yeah, that question of growth and at what point does it become too much? I have a question about how does Greenville plan for the stress on its infrastructure of so much more residents? What's it doing to the sewers, to the roads, the traffic?
Well, you hear that and everything, but I start with the idea that if you have a fast-growing area, strong economy, people moving in, and by the way, it was in the paper just yesterday, the New York Times, that South Carolina is the fastest-growing state in the United States. That was in the news last week, South Carolina. And within South Carolina, it's the Myrtle Beach area number 1, Charleston area number 2, a little right behind number 3, and drops down from there. And but what's the best way to manage your growth? And I'd say the big picture is you build parks, you build trails, you build quality of life communities, and again, you do it when you can. The area around Unity Park, if we had never built Unity Park, it looked terrible, but in the next decade or so, it would have been all apartments. It would have been 6- and 7-story apartments in all directions, because we have a lot of those in the city and beyond like you do here. And that's what it would have been had we not intervened and made it a park-centric. So I think that's still the best way to respond to growth. But we do invest in infrastructure. I think away from that, we invest in our police, we invest in our city facilities, our sewers, our stormwater, our water system. We invest heavily in all that.
Well, and that gets to this question. Development along rivers almost always runs up against floodplains. How did that affect your projects as they are so close to the river? And so stormwater infrastructure, what are you guys?
The park, a huge element of the park is the river that runs through it. And the river was in horrible shape. Things had fallen in and all. The renovation of the river, we literally bulldozed the river and rebuilt it with modern standards. So how you conserve water and retain water. So the river now is beautiful from there, but it's also, the park itself is one large stormwater
It is.
retention pond.
Mhm.
Built to be that. So we built that way. We talked about it. We spent a lot of stormwater money to make it so. We still wonder. And then came Hurricane Willie. We got to test it. Boy, we get to test it. To our surprise, but it was a good surprise. Virtually the entire park was a lake. But it was supposed to be, because it's built in terraces. If you don't know you're there, but if you do an aerial, you can see it. And it became a Lake Community Park. And then we had sections of the park, like the Children's Spring Park, which they said, don't worry, that's outside of any possible water invasion. It was dry. And the Lake Community Park, within 48 hours, the water was gone. It worked exactly as it was supposed to be, just astounding. And that's what it was supposed to be. So we relieve the flooding downstream of the falls in downtown, because of the water. So kudos to the
Parks is in.
the engineers who figured that out, because we were astounded and are astounded.
I love stormwater parks, and I think it's just such a trend, and it's really.
And even the playground equipment, I learned kind of during Helene how detailed it is. Playground equipment is intended to be underwater. It has. I mean, it's down to
take the bath.
benches, everything. Yeah, I didn't even know that until it was down to that kind of detail. Everything to be water resilient, to recover quickly, and it did. It did everything it was supposed to do.
Awesome. How there are various tools for this, but I mean, how are you guaranteeing that the affordable housing at Unity Park remains affordable?
That's a good question. A lot of cities have learned over the years how fast 10 years goes. And so we look at 20 years, 30 years, things like that, 25 years. And we also, in case you wonder affordability, we use the government standards of AMI for all these. So we focus it between 60% to 100%, really to 80%. That's kind of our sweet spot for affordability in workforce housing. There's something in the 120s, we don't even consider that affordable housing. So we focus on that. So we donated the land, we have a housing fund, we use the LIHTC program and other tools at our disposal. But it's hard. It's very difficult. It's difficult these days, construction costs, etc. But that's our focus. So we laid all that out early. This is what it would look like. It would be a mixed income neighborhood, mixed income development. But the affordability element would be according to these standards.
So Anonymous writes, it sounds like a key piece of this was capturing more of the growth that was already occurring in the region. You said South Carolina's been booming. What advice is there for a city that's not growing?
It's a good question. And I think we are growing, but then getting back to where it started, we were up the donut hole. We were classic city that was not growing. The suburban area was growing. I mean, people were not moving into the city because it wasn't desirable. And we said, if you want to make the city the most desirable place to live in the whole county, how can you do that? And we've succeeded in doing that. I think it's a lot tougher. Yeah, it's a lot tougher if you don't have the headwinds of a strong economy behind you. Makes it more difficult. I do think, though, even on the smaller cities, have those kind of tough issues, being aware of how you curate downtown. Even mixed use arguments. There are the examples of smaller cities that have done exactly that what we did on a much smaller scale in promoting residential downtown. And for any city, having some people living in that core, even if that core is rather vulnerable, is a good thing. And they can at least focus on it. Build that coffee shop. No.
Lots of compliments on the tree canopy along Main Street. And so and we saw the before picture with no trees. What was the initial? I mean, I know some communities, sometimes the retailers are the ones who are like, well, I don't want a tree blocking my shop windows. There can be pushback, but now, tell us the story of the trees.
Well, one thing I think is kind of a lesson I learned. When we built Falls Park, there was a good family friend of mine who was on Greenville City Council back in the days when they built the tree canopy in downtown. Took the 4-lane road, turned it 2 lanes, wide sidewalks, and put these trees in. And she came up to me and she said, Falls Park is amazing, take down the bridge, great vision and so on. And I said, yeah, But thank you for Mayor Heller and yourself years ago who took a 4-lane road and made it 2 lanes. She looked at me and she said, yeah, but you have to remember, there was no one left to complain. Yeah, bulldozing, not just putting a tree, but bulldozing the entire street from a place of business if there's anything left.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, but at the same time, that generation took advantage of an opportunity that wouldn't have been there any other time. They at least grabbed the brass ring when we had a chance to, and for that they deserve a lot of credit. Put those trees out there. No, nowadays it's out there, those businesses know if a tree falls down, that's when they're concerned.
Yeah. So there still are a bunch of questions. We're really reaching the end of our time. So I have my closing question is really pretty much always the same at the end of these.
Yeah.
And it's to ask you, what research topic would you hope that the next generation of students and faculty, I mean, here we are at Georgia Tech, a big research place, and we've got a lot of people who are looking for research topics. What, on the one hand, if somebody was, is there something in particular you've done at Greenville that you would love someone to really do some before, after, or something on? Or is it just some general topic that you would like to see more research on? Would help you do what you do so well?
I think, well, thank you. And I'll get back with you on that for the most part. I'll take you up on that offer. I really will.
Great.
But I have a feeling it's probably going to be something in the line of as you experience the success and the growth, then you have a new set of problems. And affordability is on everybody's list. You hear more about it now, but we've been talking about it for 10 years because we've really been concerned that people and everybody could live in downtown. Well, okay, you can live on the core, but finding creative ways. I'll put it this way. Just as we were as creative as we could be to make residential happen in the first place, that we took the parking lots and we took the garages and against all the naysayers. I can't tell you how people thought it was crazy. Who's going to do that? We did do it. It was successful. How can we be creative going forward in providing incentives for housing of a different type and different types, plural, all along the way in a city? Because you need the people on the street, but you need all kinds of people on the street if you want to have the energy. So it would be probably the topic that we would be focused on that every city seems to be doing.
Absolutely. Mike, you want to throw out some a research topic for the audience?
Well, I'm good.
Okay.
I've got enough students that I can.
I know you've got.
We are going to do in my class. We are going to look at regional rail costs and benefits, with Atlanta being a regional rail hub, which would be kind of interesting.
Mike is a great spot.
Just focusing on commercial, you're going to get into possibilities of passenger.
Passenger is going to be the thing, but I have my doubts.
But Mike is a great advocate for parks and green space, return on investment you get, what you get for it, and stories out. I mean, stories not unique. And yet some people still don't get it, or cities that don't get it. It's hard to be on trying to think about that. But thank you.
When I first got into that whole world, 2000 during the financial crisis, I mean, there was no city out there. And you were the only ones who were investing at all in parks. City of Atlanta was like, forget it. They were still focused on more highways, and it's changed a lot in the last 20 years. And now everybody understands that is a very good investment for the city.
A well-designed park.
Yes.
Still got to be focused on how eyes and ears in the park, how it activates. You can't just put a green space someplace where no one wants to be and you expect that to be successful. We hear that sometimes. They want to make that a park.
Lessons from Jane Jacobs. Yes, yeah.
Lessons from Jane Jacobs. But I would just say always read Jane Jacobs.
All right. I know there's more we could discuss, but I'm afraid that's all the time we have for the episode. Thank you, Mayor White, Mike Messner, and all of our attendees. You've been listening to episode 49 of Redesigning Cities, the Speedwell Foundation Talks at Georgia Tech. A video and podcast of this event will be posted to the Redesigning Cities website. And I just encourage everyone, please consider subscribing to our YouTube and Podomatic channels or whatever podcast platform you prefer.